UFC 282, the salaries are out, the fights are made, there's some gold on the line. We're going to look at the entire card, top down, start to finish, and I'm going to tell you the spots that I like and the spots that I don't like. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. We're back and we're early. I know that consistency is. Noise! And we have to be back early because we need a good get back week. Last week, a lot of the dogs were barking. Unfortunately, many of them weren't our dogs. So you could say we had mixed results. And speaking of mixed results, the first fighter right at the top of the slate that we're going to be looking at is Edmen Shahbazyan. He's fighting Dalcha Lungiambula this week. Edmen could be had for around -300, but that's not normally the price you would pay for a man like this in a position like this. Let me explain. Edmen Shahbazyan has taken 3 straight L's, and in all of those fights, he wasn't the better grappler. Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, Nasruddin Imavov all out-grappled Shahbazyan and ultimately beat Shabazyan. Dalcha Lungiambula, he's got good takedown defense, obviously known for his judo, and he's going to be looking for takedowns of his own, testing that 57% takedown defense from Shabazyan. And he's going to have to, because on the feet, Edmen Shahbazyan would piece him up and knock him out. The speed, the length, the technique, all that would be too much for Dalcha. And I know that Dalcha has power. I know that's a common thing to say about him, but it's not crazy power. It's normal power.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Obviously, every round starts on the feet, and I think Edmen's going to want to keep this fight on the feet because although he likes to mix in the grappling as well, I think he'll feel the strength of Lungiambula in the clinch and say, I don't want none of this, brother. You're good. And I really think that if they spend too much time in the clinch, Dalcha can dominate. I want to pick Dalcha here. I think he's the sharper play, but the age gap, the poor cardio of Lungiambula, that's going to keep me away. If Lungiambula was more of a finisher, if he was somebody who would make the most of his opportunities when he gets somebody on the ground, then I would consider playing him. But if Edmen Shahbazyan has shown us anything in these last couple of losses, is that he's tough and he's hard to put away even when somebody's in a dominant position. So very real possibility that Dalcha Lungiambula has a lot of success early, maybe takes the first round off Shabazyan, but overall the 25-year-old is going to start to take over at some point. He's probably going to find that knockout blow somewhere in the second round, maybe the third round. I'm thinking a high kick. I like Edmen Shahbazyan, especially considering that Lungiambula is going to be toast by the end of the second round. And at that point, he might be more willing to accept bottom position. So Edmen Shahbazyan could mix it up, have success with the wrestling, definitely a lot of success on the feet. Give me Edmen Shahbazyan to win this fight inside the distance. Next at 9,300, we have Camerson Saaimon. He's fighting Steven Koslow this week. Saaiman and Koslow both making their debut. They're 2 of many fighters that are making their debut this week. It doesn't show it on DraftKings, but Camerson Saaimon recently fought on Dana White's Contender Series where he looked great. He slept Josh Wang Kim. He, in fact, folded Josh Wang Kim like laundry. And obviously, he's looking to do the same thing this week. He throws with bad intentions and a ton of confidence. And you see in some of these fights, he's closing distance with his strikes, but it's not wild. He's pretty sharp considering the limited fighting experience, being only 21 years old. It's still very effective. At times, he does eat more shots than you would like to see on his way in. If you watch back some of his fights at EFC, he's getting hit cleanly by real low-level guys. And that's definitely concerning when you come up to this level. But on the other side, you have Steven Koslow, who has fought also very low-level competition, but he's looked exactly how you would want him to look in those matchups. He's had 6 fights, all finishes in the first round. He's fought 6 rounds in 6 fights. While on this side of the matchup, Camerson Saaimon has fought double the rounds. He's fought 12 rounds in 6 fights.
Quick mess.
Everyone is different. Every matchup is different. But what this is telling me is that Saaiman might not be the more dangerous guy here. He might be the more willing striker with bigger power, but we might have a more dangerous guy on the other side. Because if Saaiman thinks that he's going to be able to get into the second round, take his time, find that shot that ends the night, I don't think that opportunity will be there for him. And I say that because Koslow is going to look to get the fight to the ground immediately. He's going to have an advantage there. He's going to look to expose him. At 21 years old, making your debut with only 6 fights under your belt, I think this line is way too wide to put on Camerson Saaimon. And I understand that Koslow is young as well, only 6 fights, making his debut on short notice, but I favor his grappling heavy style in a matchup like this, and I'll happily take plus money on Koslow. I like the dog in this spot. I think Steven Koslow does a good job of closing distance, getting to the spots that he needs to on the mat, and finishing this by a sub in the first round. Give me Steven Koslow by submission. Next at 9,200, we have the uncrowned Diamond King, the guy who's the main event favorite, Magomed Ankalaev. He's fighting Jan Blachowicz this week. Magomed Ankalaev has been on championship trajectory since day one. He has all the tools to beat anyone in this division. He's the most complete fighter in the division, you can argue. And at the top, the guys wearing the strap, they're normally the most complete fighters. Magomed Ankalaev has crazy high fight IQ, good cardio, and when I say cardio, I mean it's binary, right? You either have it or you don't. And I don't mean that you can either breathe or you can't, but I mean you could either fight for however long you need to fight, whether that's a 3-round fight or a 5-round fight, or you can't. Magomed Ankalaev checks that box. He can fight for 25 minutes and he'll be just fine. On top of that, he's got some of the most underrated striking in the division and grappling in his back pocket. He doesn't throw a lot, but he's extremely precise when he does throw, and I think he will have no problem winning this fight on the feet, and he could realize a ton of success if he wants to take Blachowicz down. On the other side, Jan Blachowicz, former champion, but I will say that I've gone on record saying that Jan Blachowicz is the worst champion in light heavyweight history. And that might sound harsh, but I do want to acknowledge that he's an elite fighter. He's a great fighter, but when I look at the guys who have held the belt at 205, I put Jan Blachowicz at the bottom. If you're the worst of the best, that's not a bad thing. He also doesn't throw too much. He's more measured in his approach, and he has power, of course, Polish power. We know about it. He has some knockouts in the last couple of years, but nothing that I see makes me think that he's going to clip Magomed Ankalaev. Again, Ankalaev has crazy high fight IQ. He's not going to make too many mistakes. He's not going to put himself in a position where he gets countered with a big hook and that's it. Jan Blachowicz is also up against it because he's at a massive grappling disadvantage. Outside of Magomed Ankalaev's fight with Paul Craig, makes little to no mistakes. I think Ankalaev is going to be our new champion, and it could be like that for a while because there's really only 2 guys in the weight class that I think can beat him, and one of them just vacated the title. So I don't know if we're going to see Magomed Ankalaev lose anytime soon unless they give my guy Jamal Hill a call, but the pick for me in the main event is going to be Magomed Ankalaev by decision. Next at 9100, we have the people's main event, Paddy the Baddie, and it's always going to be the people's main event when Paddy's fighting. When Paddy's the man right now. He talks the talk, he walks the walk. In his last 2 fights, he showed dominance on the ground. Yes, Jordan Levitt was able to take him down, but you knew that Paddy was in a good spot as soon as he got back up. And I think we see him look good in the grappling exchanges this week as well, because we know that Jared Gordon's going to look to wrestle. That's Jared Gordon's bread and butter. On top of that, he doesn't have a great chin, and I think he knows it. Paddy throws heavy hooks on the feet. We saw that in his UFC debut against Luigi Van Der Remy, so it wouldn't surprise me if we saw Gordon try to take him down right away to avoid those hooks. Problem for Gordon is that Paddy's probably the better grappler in this fight as well, so he's going to stuff takedown attempts and find himself on top just like he did against Jordan Levitt. We've seen Jared Gordon taken down and controlled in the past. Most recently, we saw that against Grant Dawson, who is going to be able to do that to a lot of guys in the division. Paddy Pimblett's not one of them. I like Paddy to win here inside the distance because he's got that solid chin, the low-key heavy hands, good hips, high fight IQ in the clinch. And going back to the fight against Jordan Levitt, when he defended that takedown up against the fence by cinching up the choke on the far side, that was nuts. Threatening a choke from that angle ultimately got him in the position that he needed to find the submission. So give me Paddy Pimblett this week. Too strong, too athletic, too much hype to be slowed down in a co-main event spot by Jared Gordon.
I'm being serious.
So Paddy wins. He picks up a finish. Pricey on DraftKings. We'll talk more about DraftKings in the final picks video later this week, but just to put this out there while you're building your lineups throughout the week, you already know he's going to be one of the highest owned fighters, if not the highest owned fighter on the entire slate. So be careful when you're trying to fit him into lineups, because the last time he fought against Jordan Levitt, we knew he was going to win inside the distance, and we also knew, we said it on this channel, not to play him on DraftKings. 88 DraftKings points at the salary that he was that day was not getting it done. So don't make that mistake, because he went over owned, he underperformed from a DraftKings perspective, and he might do the same thing in this spot if Jared Gordon's able to have success early. Again, we'll talk more about that in the videos later in the week, but just keep that in mind. The pick for me in this fight is Paddy the Baddie inside the distance. Stop what you're doing. If you haven't hit the like button already, what's your problem, man? Comment something for the algorithm. You know how it works. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We're trying to make a hard push to 2,000 before year's end. Next at 9,000, we have
One of the best names you will ever say out loud.
Rosas Jr., and he's making his UFC debut against Perrin this week. As you know, if you're watching this guy's young. He's 18 years old. He's 6-0. He's coming off a Contender Series win where he was all over Mondo Gutierrez in that fight. Secured multiple takedowns, racked up nearly 12 minutes of control time, and really dominated the fight for the most part. Not every second of that fight, not even every minute of that fight, but for the most part, he was pretty dominant. Mondo Gutierrez kept looking for guillotine, which is a low percentage choke in MMA, and it's one of the most frustrating things you can watch when you see guys jump guillotine after guillotine and they don't get it. But the reason why I bring that up is because Rosas, even in some of these situations where the guillotine looked like it was tight and he was in a bad position, stayed calm. And that's impressive when you talk about the opportunity that he had on Contender Series as a 17-year-old to remain calm in that situation instead of panic, move too much, get the choke tighter, and then have to tap. It was excellent work. Rosas even took the back a few times, then slid off and ultimately landed on bottom, but he still never seemed to panic. So I love his confidence in the clinch. I love his confidence in the grappling and the pace that he brings because it's relentless. And whether he was on top or whether he was on bottom, one thing that he's shown multiple times throughout his career is that he's willing to improve position. He's always moving. On the other side, Perrin, I'm not convinced the guy is UFC caliber. He's frustrating to watch. Last time out against Aori Kilang, he didn't fight until the third round. If you let this kid get up 2 rounds to 0 and you're tired going into the third, you're not going to have a situation where you're going to knock him out late, and at least not Perrin. He also got outclassed by Mario Bautista, and I think this is another situation where we have matchmaking with very clear intentions. It's a very winnable fight for a very marketable guy. I think Rosas, based on what I've seen in film, I think that he would really struggle with guys who have bigger power, guys who are tighter with their hands, guys who have heavy top control, but Perrin is a body. He's tough, he won't quit, but he's a body. He's the fall guy the UFC is trotting out there to make the new kid look good, and I think that's smart. You got to build up stars somehow. You got to create story and intrigue somehow, and I think this is a good way to do it. Start putting together guys that he's going to be able to beat and look good against, and Perrin is one of those. In this fight, I do expect around 5 to 6 takedowns for Rosas. He pushes that crazy pace like we mentioned before, and I expect him to win a decision and look good doing it. I could also see a rear naked choke considering how fast he gets to the back, but the most likely outcome for me here is that he just outworks Perrin for 3 rounds. So give me Raul Rosas Jr. by decision. I think he makes it look easy, and I think, again, 5 to 6 takedowns, probably one of your stronger DraftKings plays this week, but again, somebody who probably, just like Paddy the Batty, is going to garner a lot of ownership. Next at 8,900, we have Vincius Salvador. He's going to be fighting Daniel Da Silva this week. Daniel Da Silva, Daniel Lacerda, whatever you want to call him, he's basically Estela Nunes. They're the same person. I've never seen both of them in the same room at the same time. I'm convinced that I'm watching Estela Nunes fight back-to-back weeks. Because Daniel Da Silva is skillful, he's powerful, but he's got no durability. All sizzle, no steak. And he looked good early against Jeff Molina, then he tires and gets knocked out. He came out guns blazing against Francisco Figueiredo, takes him down right away, but then he gets knee barred and loses. He dropped Victor Altamirano, then he lets him get right back up. Altamirano starts butchering the body, drops him, and finishes the fight. I can't bet on Daniel Da Silva, and the reason why I can't bet on him is because he needs to have instant success to win a fight. It needs to be clear during those first couple of exchanges that he's much better than his opponent, and he's probably going to be able to get him out of there. Vincius Salvador is not somebody that he's just going to be able to fold up and move on. Vincius Salvador is going to knock this kid out. Salvador's got serious power, and he's making his UFC debut this week, but this is a matchup that he can look good in. One clean shot will make Da Silva crumble. He'll look for a way out. We've seen that now. We know who he is. And I'm assuming after Salvador packs him up, he's not going to be in the UFC anymore. But Vinny Salvador is just getting started in the UFC, and we have a new powerful flyweight who's going to show up, make a statement this week with a first-round knockout, and inject some energy into the division. So give me the guy who's going to be throwing bricks, especially at a glass cannon. I like Vincius Salvador this week. Again, we'll talk more about DraftKings later in the week, but nobody's playing this guy. He is our Matus Nicolau of the week. Nobody's going to be playing Vincius Salvador. He's going to go way under the radar, and he probably shouldn't because he's going to win inside the first round by knockout. Next at 8,800, we have Dricus Du Plessis. He's going to be fighting Darren Till this week. The return of Darren Till is pretty cool. He's up against it this week, let's be honest. Dricus Du Plessis fights at a high pace. He marches guys down, throws bombs, mixes in takedowns well, is always looking for submissions. He's the bigger, stronger, more well-rounded guy in this matchup, and I might add that he's probably the more confident fighter in this matchup. He's just getting started in the UFC. 3 impressive wins back to back to back, and Darren Till's been going downhill ever since he got his title shot against Tyron Woodley. And he was really always too big to be fighting at 170 pounds. The weight cut was killing him, but physically, he doesn't even look good at 185. He fought some of the best in the world recently, so you have to give Darren Till a little bit of a pass, but it hasn't gone well for him. And he's a tweener. He's too much of a tweener. He's too big for welterweight, but he's not strong enough for middleweight, in my opinion, and I think he's going to get dominated in this fight. I honestly think if Darren Till loses this week, he probably retires, goes on to coaching or a different sport like boxing.
And the new king of boxing.
But a loss here would leave him 6-5-1 in the UFC, 1-5 in his last 6, and despite training with Khamzat Chimaev and the team over there, he doesn't seem to be getting any better. And I know it's hard for us to say that considering that he hasn't been active, he hasn't been fighting a whole lot, but has anything led to you thinking that he's gotten any better? Now, granted, I think Darren Till could have success in this fight. There is a path to victory here, and I think that would be him fighting the way that Brad Tavares fought Du Plessis last time out. Because Darren Till can counterpunch effectively. He can counterpunch while moving forward, which is something that not too many guys are all that great at, but Darren Till is pretty proficient. So if he counters effectively, uses his footwork, throws a lot of leg kicks out there, if he has some success the way that Tavares did, he could end up winning this fight. But Darren Till doesn't let his hands go. That's always been a problem. He's not a grappler at all, and he might be outgunned here physically. Dricus Du Plessis is just not a good matchup for Darren Till, in my opinion. Momentum is a serious thing, and when Darren Till was undefeated and showed up in the UFC and was kicking everybody's ass and talking a lot of garbage, that was awesome, and his momentum was there, but it's halted. It's done. It's stopped. And I like Darren Till. I'm a Darren Till fan. I'm a Darren Till guy. I wish he would succeed more than he has in the UFC, but we have to be objective here. We're making prediction videos. You're putting your hard-earned on the line. I'm going to give you what I think is the most objective information, and that is that Dricus Du Plessis wins this fight. He might be able to secure takedowns. Definitely the more willing grappler and probably the stronger guy, and he's going to be the one who has more success if they do grapple, and he'll obviously have success on the feet as well if he's putting more out there. So give me Dricus Du Plessis to win this fight, and give me him to win by decision. I know that's not normally his jam, but Darren Till's not an easy guy to put away. So give me Dricus Du Plessis by decision. Next at 8,700, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's going to be fighting Chris Daukaus this week. Biggie Boy has settled into his level, his role in this division. We've finally carved out a place where we know he belongs. He will lose to the division's elite, but he's going to smoke everybody below that. He lost to Volkov and Blades and Gon and Ngannou, but he destroyed Augusto Sakai, Junior Dos Santos, knocked out Overeem at the buzzer, albeit he was getting worked for most of that fight. And obviously, he started his UFC career on a really hot streak with 3 knockout wins. And for me, it really comes down to his power and his shot selection and the pure striking experience that he brings to this fight. On the other side, Chris Daukaus is coming off of back-to-back knockout losses. He's taken a good amount of time off, which should help, but I still think a third knockout loss is in the cards for him this week. He has looked good, though. He has looked good in the UFC, picking up 4 knockouts before the 2 setbacks, but I don't trust his chin against somebody who's got that touch of death. I expect Daukaus to look good in spots, putting together combinations, fighting with that pressure that he brings, but Biggie Boy is best when he's able to counter. If he puts himself in a position to counter, and I think Chris Daukaus will afford him that, then he's probably going to have success. And I don't want people to forget about what was going on with Biggie Boy before MMA and all that kickboxing experience, right? Like, while Chris Daukaus was protecting and serving the community, Biggie Boy was knocking people out in kickboxing. So I'll take the better striker, the more experienced striker, the guy who's fought better competition, the guy with more power, and the guy who isn't coming off of back-to-back knockout losses. Give me Jairzinho Rozenstruik by first-round knockout. Next at 8,600, we have Western New York's own Billy Quarantillo. He's going to be fighting Alexander Hernandez this week, and this should be a banger. Billy Q is always coming to fight. He brings some of the best volume in the UFC, and he's all action. He's going to push a pace. He's a grinder, and he's going to try to drag Hernandez into some deep water this week. Now, he isn't the most efficient with his takedowns, but he chains them together relentlessly, and ultimately that's where he's able to find them. But that's pretty much Billy Q in a nutshell. Hard work, right? Grind you out, throw a lot of punches, get in your face, try to take you down. On the other side, Alex Hernandez has some power in his hands early. He made his UFC debut, knocked out Beneil Dariush. That's aging like a fine wine. And his last 2 wins are knockout wins as well. I don't consider him a knockout or bust kind of guy, but I do think that that would be his only path here. And I say that because Alex Hernandez is not going to win more minutes than Billy Quarantillo. He might look good in certain spots in these 5 minutes round to round, but the volume from Billy Q is going to overshadow the big moments that Hernandez might have unless he's able to come up with a knockdown. And as the fight wears on, Billy Quarantillo is going to crank up the pressure, and you might see Alex Hernandez fade a little bit. Now, my worry for Quarantillo is not only the big power that Hernandez could bring early, but also how he responds to being taken down. He doesn't have great takedown defense, and Alex Hernandez might have no other choice but to look for takedowns if he's getting outstruck 2-1. We could look at his fight against Gavin Tucker as an example. Billy Q was taken down over and over again, but that's my only concern for him this week. We know that he's tough as nails, he's not going to be finished on the feet, and I think that he probably wins every round here just by that volume, that pace, that pressure, and just grinding on him, winning minutes. Like, look at the strike totals: 196, 179, 136, 112, 110, and then let's go here to Alex Hernandez and see how many strikes he's throwing on average. 39 in a stoppage, it was only 2 rounds. 20 in a stoppage, that was only 1 round. 50 in a decision loss. 29, but that was only in a 1-round finish. And then you have 41 finished in the second round. 26 over 15 minutes. 54, 86, 9 in a quick win finish. But you're looking at a situation where Alex Hernandez is not putting enough out there to keep up with Billy Quarantillo. So the pick for me is simple. It's easy. It's Billy Q by decision. What? Are you asking me what I'm doing? I'm setting my lineup for Kunith's $1 winner-take-all challenge. Yeah, it's a private contest on DraftKings. I already sent you the link. Why are we doing this? Why are you acting like you don't know what this is? If anybody is ever wondering where Oscar is, just look at the bottom of the leaderboard in the private contest. You'll see him right there. Now, if you want to take $1 of Oscar's money, you can hit the link in the pinned comment. That'll bring you to the private contest. It's $1, winner-take-all, single entry. Do you even have the guts? We'll see. We'll see if you have the guts. This next fight is Joaquin Buckley against Chris Curtis. Joaquin Buckley on DraftKings can be had for $8,500. This has fight of the night written all over it because these dudes are going to go to war. For Chris Curtis, there's a lot I like. I like the volume. I like the timing that translates to power. I say that because I don't think that Chris Curtis has the touch of death, but I do think that in some of these fights it can look that way because of the way that he's catching these guys during an exchange, a flurry, a combination. That ability to stay tight and technical and composed, especially during a brawl, is going to serve him very well this week. Because you have a guy in Joaquin Buckley who would probably fight in a pair of black ones if he could. Joaquin Buckley comes to fight, and he rarely goes the distance. And on paper, his output isn't the highest, but it doesn't feel that way when you're watching him. Because when he lets his hands go, he can end somebody's night. And with that said, Buckley will invite the brawl. He knows he has the power and the heart to take one and give one effectively. And we really saw that in his last fight in the 3rd round against Nasruddin Imavov, where he was able to dig deep, real deep, and nearly win a fight that he was losing. So I got a ton of respect for both of these gentlemen and what they bring to the table. It should be bananas for however long the fight goes, but I do have to pick Action Man to get it done here. I think he catches Buckley in this fight, and I think he catches him with either a counter hook or a straight right hand, and he sits Buckley down. Because the way that the Action Man mixes up strikes from the body, upstairs, it's going to be huge for him because those body shots and extended combinations, that's going to throw Buckley's timing off. So I expect Curtis to put a lot out there and ultimately find the knockout this week, and you're getting a good price on Curtis as well. I think a lot of that has to do with the respect everybody has for Buckley's power, as you should, but also how he looked against Jack Hermansson. But let me explain something to you about that fight, you punk. That was on short notice. He was less than a month removed from a tough fight against Rodolfo Vieira. He had to fly to the UK. It was a lot going on. So take that recency bias and use it. Use it the other way, because Buckley's not going to use the same kind of footwork Jack Hermansson did. He's going to be there to be hit, not like Jack Hermansson, who was in and out. And I think that Chris Curtis finds the blow that finishes the night. Give me the Action Man inside the distance. I'm thinking 2nd round knockout. And I love me some Joaquin Buckley. Don't get it twisted. Next at 8,400, we have Ilia Topuria. He's going to be fighting Bryce Mitchell this week. Amazing fight. Amazing fight. It's rare when you see two undefeated guys matched up like this, and it's not like the first fight of the night where both guys are 6-0 and making their UFC debut. These guys are established UFC veterans who have undefeated records, the real deal on both sides. And Ilia Topuria is the real deal. The guy's good at everything. Serious power in his hands, excellent wrestling, and we know he has heart. We especially know that now after his fight with Jai Herbert, where he's up a weight class and he gets knocked down by Jai Herbert, who's a guy, if he catches you the right way, he's putting you to sleep. But he gets back up, he gets into the fight, and very cartoonishly knocks Jai Herbert out. He made easy work of Ryan Hall, same with Damon Jackson, and these guys are good guys that he's just running through. This guy has future title contender, championship caliber skill, in my opinion. I think he's a tough guy for anybody in the division, but on the other side, we have Arkansas. Bryce Mitchell, 6 for 6 in the UFC, and just a junkyard dog, just a workhorse. He's got 18 takedowns in 6 UFC fights, crazy high motor, dropped Edson Barboza with a straight punch, which is a huge feather in his Carhartt cap. He's going to be looking for takedowns. He's going to try to grind on Ilia Topuria. The problem is there's a really good chance that Ilia Topuria is a better wrestler. He's never been taken down in the UFC, but the grit and the blue collar approach from Bryce Mitchell is going to pay dividends late in this fight. Because Mitchell's not going to stop working. He's not going to stop moving. And Topuria is going to find himself in cooking positions if he's not careful. We saw Yusuf Zalal, fan of the show, give Ilia Topuria trouble in the 3rd round and even reverse him at different points in that fight. I think that Bryce Mitchell wins this fight, and I think he finds a finish in the 3rd round with ground and pound, maybe a submission, but I think that if he fights back and forth for 2 rounds with him, he's going to wear Ilia Topuria out. This is a guy who's used to just dispatching of people. I think Bryce Mitchell's the real deal. He's the best fighter and most accomplished fighter that Topuria has ever seen up until this point, and I love that we're able to get him at this price. So give me Thug Nasty this week. Give me Bryce Mitchell inside the distance. And you're probably thinking, inside the distance? Bryce Mitchell? I don't know about that, but if the fight goes the way it needs to go for him to win, that means that there's nothing left of Topuria in the 3rd round. Nothing left. Next at 8,300, we have Erik Silva. Not that one, the other one. He's making his UFC debut against TJ Brown this week. He's somebody who recently fought in Contender Series, absolutely ran through his opponent, and he's done a lot of that in his career up until this point. His striking leaves a lot to be desired. He does have that front kick upstairs, like the one that Michael Chandler caught Tony Ferguson with, and he seems to throw that a good amount, but outside of that, he's really not great on the feet. You can almost say that he's poor defensively. Where Erik Silva does his best work is in the grappling. His wrestling looks good, but it's his scrambling and transitions that look even better. And I've seen him have a lot of success in a very specific position when I was watching his fights back, where people would shoot on him and he'd sprawl and get that front headlock position. That is where he is money. He's great at controlling his opponent there. He's great at finding the back from that position, and he's going to need to do that this week as he deals with the takedown attempts from TJ Brown. And I will say, on camera, in front of the world, I have washed my hands with TJ Brown after his last fight. That's because he looked so bad last time out against Shaylon Nurdenbeke. He was throwing up submissions, but he accepted bottom way too much. He looked tired early, and he was controlled on the mat much more than you'd like to see. I expect this fight to hit the mat pretty quickly, whether that's on Brown's terms or whether that's on Silva's terms. I think they're going to hit the mat right away. TJ Brown shoots a ton of takedowns. He's shot and secured takedowns in almost all of his UFC fights, and this will be no different. But I just think that when he does shoot one of these takedowns, especially if it's later in the fight, he's going to get stuffed. Erik Silva's going to find his back, and even if TJ Brown does secure top position, I think that Erik Silva's going to be able to execute a sweep and find himself on top. I really like Erik Silva this week, not only from a betting perspective, but also on DraftKings at 8,300 with that takedown upside, with that grappling upside, and with that finish potential. I think he's in a great spot. I like Erik Silva here. I like him to win, and I like Erik Silva by submission. And the last fight that we're going to look at is OSP. He's going to be fighting UFC newcomer Antonio Trocoli this week. Trocoli stepping in on short notice, making his debut. I don't see, though, how OSP wins this fight. What I do see is money coming in on Trocoli, and I expect that to continue throughout the week, because the more you look at this fight, the more you realize OSP's really up against it. He's in a tough spot. OSP's a vet, 39 years old. He's been jumping back and forth from light heavyweight to heavyweight. If you couple that with his age, I think that 205 is going to be very hard for him to get to. We've seen him miss weight before at 205, and it's not getting any easier for him. And obviously, Obviously, bad weight cuts impact your gas tank more often than not. He's fighting a guy who wants to take him down, a guy that's much bigger than him, a guy that's much younger than him, and a guy who's jacked. This dude just a couple of years ago was fighting at welterweight, and now he's fighting at 205. So this is tough for OSP because he's going to be fighting a guy who is massive, even bigger than OSP is, and OSP has good size for the division. And maybe he can catch him with something. Maybe he'll catch him with a straight left hand, or maybe he's able to execute a choke in an opportunistic position on the mat. Again, OSP is a vet. But I honestly think that Trocoli takes him down at some point in the first round, tires him out, and finds a submission in the second round. OSP is strong, and he might defend takedowns early, but at some point he's going to gas out. And one thing I do want to mention as well is that OSP has made the walk in the UFC 25 times. He's fought John Jones for the title. I say that to say this. This guy's getting paid. You know he is. The longer you're in the UFC, the more money that they give you. That's why somebody like Angela Hill makes a bunch of money when she fights. Trocoli could show up, win the fight, get a performance bonus, and let's say OSP missed weight and had to give him 20% of his purse, he could have all those things happen for him, and I think that OSP would still make more money than him on the night. So at the risk of having my conspiracy tinfoil hat kind of energy for you guys, I think that the UFC probably wants Trocoli to win this fight. So I'm going to take Antonio Trocoli to win. I'm going to take him by submission. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. That way I can bring more of this to you.